Today I'm talking about Ghost of Yotei. This is the follow-up to Sucker Punch's Ghost of Tsushima, which was a pretty kick-ass game. You might not call it a sequel because it's like a completely new adventure, different part of Japan, different time period, new main character, but it very much is the continuation of the gameplay ideas from Ghost of Tsushima. So I'll say that right off the jump. This is a bigger, meaner sequel. More to do, more cool stuff, more action, more world, more story. But it's not quite the smack-in-the-face, holy cow that the original Tsushima was. Like, it doesn't quite hit as hard the second time around. If you were looking for a complete revolution, a complete overhaul, you don't really get that here. It's more Ghost of Tsushima. But not in a bad way. Don't get me twisted. When I say more, I mean a lot more is packed in here. And if you just wanted more, you might dig this, because I certainly have been. Just so you know, I've been playing this on PS5 Pro, and everything I'm showing you is completely spoiler-free. The game takes place in the northern region of Japan called Ezo. You play as Atsu, a woman out for revenge after her family was murdered when she was a child by a group of murderous dudes called the Yotei 6. Each one unique and identifiable in typical, kind of predictable video game boss fashion. You set out as adult Atsu to murder all these guys. She's out for revenge, and she's a brute. She's not a samurai like Jin Sakai, concerned with honor and the ways of the culture and balance. She's just a mercenary. So she fights different. She uses different weapons and different gadgets and even interacts with the world and people differently. Both protagonists are considered ghosts by their world, but where Jin Sakai was kind of like a Batman, Atsu's more like a Boba Fett, a more anonymous, shrewd bounty hunter focused only on the mission. But they'll occasionally surprise you. I'm talking about the good Boba Fett, not the one who instantly dies in Return of the Jedi. Maybe not the best comparison, but I'm rolling with it. The game is really different structurally from the last game, and it's probably one of the bigger departures. Yotei is extremely nonlinear and gives you all these Yotei 6 targets that you can pursue in whatever order you want. You're going to get clues as you progress, and you can choose which clues and which information to pursue, and it happens in some pretty interesting and organic ways. It doesn't feel like a video game just blasting stuff in your face and pointing you in the next direction. It's more slow information gathering as you progress through these lands. As a storytelling experiment, it's really nice to see Sucker Punch's good storytelling chops work well here. Even if the game is filled with non-linear story progression and an endless amount of open-world distractions, even more so this time, the game still manages to do a great job staying focused on the core mission. It's hard for me to explain how, but you just never lose sight of what the overall plot is. The last game did that well through really thoughtful side quests and activities design. That's even more the case here. You can tell it's trickier because there's a lot more freedom with how things progress. I was pretty skeptical of the Yotei 6 thing because I feel like the here are all the bosses, go out and kill them approach has been done to death at this point in video games, but they managed to make it feel different and interesting. It's not half-assed, and it really picks up after quite a few hours. Some of it's predictable, which might bum some folks out, but the presentation and performances really elevated it. There's a lot more action and a lot of cool big action set pieces. Even better than last time, the game does a good job of blending what's a side quest and what's a main quest because there's a lot of variety. Even some of the smaller activities all just feels handcrafted. Unfortunately, the still following foxes and following birds, which disappointingly feels like more of the same. But then on the flip side, there are some stronger side quests here. Good stuff. Many of which I completed and found myself going, damn, I could have just walked past that. The cool part is that your interactions with enemies are always different. You might come across Ronin questioning settlers about your whereabouts, or someone pretending to need help fixing a broken cart, only to ambush you with his friends. Surviving these encounters often lets you interrogate the last remaining enemy for intel on key objectives, after which you can choose which lead to follow first. but there's a high chance that on your way to your next main story mission, you will constantly get distracted. NPCs around campfires might ask for your help. Sometimes it's a short 10-minute side quest. Other times it's a longer one that rewards you with an entirely new armor set. The bounties in each region are my favorite new activity. Every target has a short story and its own personality. It's a nice way to earn some quick cash, and sometimes you even get a unique item out of it as well. For the most exciting rewards, you'll want to hunt down the mythic tales. They're even more varied than in Tsushima. Let you go to some very cool environments. They have unique gameplay twists. It's really some of the most exciting content in the game. Combat this time around builds off what came before. It's still the same type of combat. It's not the most difficult combat in the world, but it can be really fun and satisfying. The perfect parry clangs, man, those feel so damn good and badass to pull off still. Doing face-offs and duels and chopping dudes' arms off still doesn't get old. But katana weapon stances are out. That really threw me off, to be honest. It's replaced with different weapons, so more moves, more situational combat awareness is needed where you choose a weapon stance for a certain type of enemy with a certain type of weapon. Now you choose an entirely different weapon type against an enemy's weapon type, and they all feel fairly different. You get 5 primary weapons. There's the katana, which is your baseline. It's clean, sharp, disciplined. It's your classic martial art where perfect execution is the result of continued practice. Then you have dual katanas. That's a blur of cuts with the sole goal of crowd control against dudes with poles via speed. The adachi is slower, wider, a battlefield broom with a vendetta that considers everyone within 8 feet to be dirt, or at least able to put them under 6 feet of it. The spear extends your control, zoning, pinning enemies at range to keep them out of your own. And then there's the kusarigama, a chain blade that feels like what would happen if rhythm games drank a ton and welded the drum kit to the end of the chain. Each weapon has its own new nuances and spirit abilities and skill trees. What I enjoyed even more was facing off against enemies that would switch their weapons on the fly, meaning you do the same to counteract them in kind of like a game of weapon rock paper scissors. It's good stuff. It's still brutal, it's still bloody, and like I said, it's not the most difficult combat system in the world, but there is a good deep level of mastery to it. When you're really locked into it, it can feel great. Now, double swords don't make you instantly able to take down a spearman, but within the framing, it works with you being able to attack many times before the enemy can get an 8-foot pole swung around in a circle, while the odachi and others have their own ways of more quickly defeating enemies. Each weapon has a specific strength against others, except the katana. When facing off against others with just swords, there isn't really a weakness or strength, so it dives deeper into the strategy of very specific sword play. That means slicing between 2 spearmen, switching to the katana, taking them out, then rolling past another spearman, pulling out the odachi to take advantage of the slowness of larger enemies or smaller ones with knives or bows, dispatching them with huge slices, then switching to something else for crowd control. And this is where Yotei absolutely masters combat. It seamlessly adds variation and fluidity, flexibility in the main, but instead of losing what made the original game special, it somehow actually pulls that special part of the original game into this one and magnifies it. The pace goes from frantic to a momentary pause, like when Tom Cruise pretended he could beat a well-established swordsman with just a couple months of training in The Last Samurai. Things slow down. Do you leap in? What if they counter? Do you dash back, then power strike, hoping he won't short strike and hit you on your way in? Do you test him out with some basic attacks and see how that works? The change of combat is even more noticeable in large groups, which can happen more than I expected. Because it's not stances and it's actually weapons, you're consistently on the move. Circling around a tree gives you a second to pull out the odachi, which is useful when a 400-pound dude in freezing cold weather with no shirt is spinning a battle axe in a circle and hoping everybody falls over. This highlights the game's reliance on defense. It's absolutely vital, from the skills you can get and you have to use, like roll counters, deflecting arrows from archers, consistently running away anytime you get close to getting help from some of your friends. Ranged weapons are still here with tweaked arrow types as well as early firearms and some really cool useful throwables like fire bombs that, while similar to last time, still manage to feel really different here, and a nice burst of dirt to distract enemies mid-fight. Parry can be used in the most basic form, then in a misdirection style, pushing enemies around, then adding to that the ability to disarm and be disarmed and have to run off and grab your sword somebody kicked out of your hands. What this results in is a game that's more complex, but feels natural like the original. Can you defeat all enemies with all the weapons? Yes. The game's use of heavy and light attacks, special skills attached to your arts means you can go about it with one particular weapon if you want to. It'll just become more difficult. The only problem this can bring is in larger battles against a mixed group, can feel like you're just shuffling slices of larger and larger bits of steel consistently. It's faster, messier, and more chaotic. It also brings to the forefront any kind of deficiency in animation or button presses, which you will notice. I would suggest you experiment in the first couple fights when you get new weapons to find out exactly when it will trigger after a current move is performed. Stealth, once again, doesn't feel great at the start. It's pretty simple stuff, but like last time, it gets much stronger as the game progresses and you get better tools. Sometimes, depending on how you play though, you could end up going a long time without some useful stuff. So just keep that in mind. Really look around, really evaluate where you pursue things. Everything's blossomed out here. You scout using a spyglass, use vertical infiltration, and you benefit from all the environmental cues you've seen in the original game. You just have more options. Taking out an enemy who drops a sword lets you kick it into your hands and throw it into the back of another enemy without any restrictions, although you still can't move bodies. Stealth stretches into chain kills, adds 2-for-1 moves, and turns larger enemies and sometimes even main ones into wood to be whittled down. You also get access to a cool wolf more and more over time. It kind of starts as a random occurrence and can be earned as a new game mechanic through exploring and pursuing side objectives. The wolf is really awesome in a fight. It can save you as a kind of last stand mechanic. It can be summoned and has its own dedicated skill tree and everything. Atsu has a wolf companion that shows up randomly, but to strengthen your bond, you'll need to look out for wolf dens. Saito wants these animals gone, so it's your job to rescue them from nearby encampments. Each camp also comes with its own little twist. Saving these wolves always gives you a skill point to invest in the wolf skill tree, so the creature can more frequently help you out. Armor and cosmetic progression is the same as the last game. There's a lot of ways to look in this game, from a Ronin badass to a brute warrior to a stealth person. All that is here. And then, of course, there's still a photo mode to soak that all in too. You can camp anywhere and craft throwables and ammo. You can cook food for some buffs. What I do like is that the bow person, the armor person, and a map person for certain things can actually come to you occasionally when you camp, and you can sort out your business then and there. It's not as much of a game changer as they hyped it to be, but it is a nice touch. The game just has a lot of those nice touches. Like Tsushima, it's just a kind of chill, contemplative game at times, with side objectives like the bird and fox stuff I mentioned earlier, but also the hot springs return. Haikus are out, but now Atsu paints landscape paintings through these chill little mini-games, and also she can play her shamisen as opposed to a flute, and it's a little bit more involved. They make smart use of the touchpad for the sumi-e painting that you have to do sometimes. They didn't need to go as far as the forge or camping minigames, but the nice thing is that you can skip them all if you want. I just love that these weird little things are in the game. There are actually quite a few activities from Tsushima that return in Yotei, like bamboo cutting, shrines, omens, and fox dens, but developer Sucker Punch has done an amazing job of keeping them fresh this time around. For one, you unlock the impactful upgrades much faster. Omens always increase your health, and you only need a few bamboo strikes for a new spirit orb instead of 7 for the final upgrade in Tsushima. On top of that, every single one of these activities you come across has its own unique twist. One time I saw someone struggling to cut bamboo with a stolen sword, so I had to show them how it's done. Another time I had to drink 2 bottles of sake and then try to cut the bamboo while drunk. Trust me, there are many more fun ones you'll want to see for yourself. Where these could easily become tedious in Tsushima and Yotei, I'm always excited to find them just to see what new idea they came up with. Tsushima touched upon the mythical elements, the fantastical stuff here and there, and Yotei continues that and does a bit more in some interesting ways I'm not going to spoil. The world feels significantly bigger this time around, though. The sense of scale and variety seems like a massive upgrade. Grasslands and fields are vast, mountains are huge, and it helps just feel like a massively bigger world that you slowly piece together, following the wind to the next thing, but also getting distracted and just going on vibes. If you're like me, then GPS and golden paths are the handbrake of fun. Nothing worse than being told to track down the world's most stealthy assassin, only to find out that apparently Hansel and Gretel got there first, leaving a path of golden candy right to the enemy's doorstep. That's like buying your own Christmas present, wrapping it, and then pretending you're surprised 2 days later. Luckily, the developers thought the same thing. There are very few changes here to the actual travel and traversal and their tracking system. Ghost continues to feel almost like nothing else, really, during exploration. So that leads me to that. The game is gorgeous, the HDR implementation is great, the color palette is insane, and the foliage and atmospheric effects, they really are worth seeing in real time. Like, I'm not trying to be like a shill hype man or anything, but this game, mainly environmental more than anything, looks incredible. It has high frame rate, high resolution, and ray tracing features or options. It can do the ray tracing with 60 FPS on PS5 Pro, but with performance on base PS5, it also seems to run well. This isn't a textbook reconstruction of feudal Japan. It's more like a myth of one, a stylized dream where cherry blossoms rain down like they've got something to prove, and pollen swirls around the game world consistently, like choreography. Birds catch the same wind, dart and dive into their own beat. Trees whip under storm clouds. Flags nearly tear themselves off poles. It's hard to articulate how impactful that movement is. The combination of wide-open visibility with minimal pop-in and traversal across incredibly unique biomes. And it's immersive. It's intuitive. It's a little shy of witchcraft. It turns the act of, where do I go, into look around, pay attention, and go over there somewhere, which is exactly what exploration should feel like. The game offers the almost religious holy trinity of performance, ray tracing, and non-racing modes that you've come to expect. At least 60 FPS is going to be the sweet spot, best mix of clarity and feel that you can get. While it is playable in 30 with ray tracing or 30 with higher resolution, it's not as easy in those larger battles, and there are a great number here. With the PlayStation 5 Pro offering a mode that still targets 60 FPS with higher resolution than the base PS5's performance mode, and also still has ray tracing. The DualSense features are a great addition. My only issues that I encountered overall in many hours was a glitch where my horse wouldn't spawn, which was fixed on restart and only happened once. A little bit of clipping with clothing and stuff like that. Some of the armor sets have little clipping issues with a cape or sword poking through, and the occasional lighting flickering glitch that was kind of annoying. Very sparingly though. Otherwise, pretty smooth sailing, from my naked eye at least. Also, the music is top tier. I actually think it might have topped the last game. The score from big to small and ambient exploration music, all of it is really fantastic. It blends lo-fi textures, traditional Japanese elements, and ambient threads all throughout. It's got some amazing tracks in here, stuff you can easily listen to outside the game, with a number of traditional elements, but also a little bit of strangeness mixed in there. It's atmospheric, traditionally awesome, but never loses the idea that this is a game soundtrack, and matches beats for tension, terror, and that moment you finally track down one of the six. Voice work is pretty damn good. The Yotei 6 in particular delivers some standout performances, chilling monologues to really almost unraveling psychosis. The same can be said for the main characters. I liked all of them. Regardless of whichever language you choose, it really hits quite well. Even if the character is displaying revenge or disappointment or resonating with some particular flashback. There's some oddities here, though. You sound older than your actual mother in the flashbacks. It'd be like going to see yourself at the age of 12 and living in your own body, having all that knowledge, but for some reason you have a 36-year-old's voice. It's quite noticeable. But other than that, really quite good. The same can be said for the environmentals, the world itself, and all those sounds. the game continues the excellence we've heard before. Blades and the sliding of steel against steel can actually be heard as you're fighting off another enemy and deciding which way to go just by the sound effects occurring around you, or knocking an enemy off their feet and hearing that character slam into the mud and dirt and the hollow thump of a body cavity hitting flat-backed on a rock. They're all excellent. The same can be said for the environmentals themselves, the world spreading out around you, not only in the graphical presentation, but the audio presentation of what is there. For example, frogs croaking in a creek, fire crackling below you and just subtly to your left as you're on a cliff. It all works very well. Now, Yotei's strengths can sometimes be its weaknesses. The sandbox nature of this game offers a different feeling than the original one that is about its own exploration, your own risk and reward, and exploring in a way that this character would. However, it also means at times it can feel more directionless than the original game did, and dare I say, a bit closer to open world games than its older brother. There are times where I sat back and thought to myself, man, you know what? What should I really do next, as freedom is inherently formless? It's not a surprise that this happens, but at times it's a tiny bit of a narrative stumbling block that affects the pace more than I actually expected. While there is story development, even with flashbacks, much of it is behind you. That's why I mentioned a sword wielding a sword before, because you're at the end of that swing. For better or worse, let me give you an example. There are a couple times where you train up on a new weapon or item, and just about when I thought there would be that moment where you have a battle to test all your skills up against the trainees or something like that, the game just went to a cutscene and moved on with me, apparently having defeated everybody. It never feels unfinished. It can just go from feeling rushed to a little bit slower more often than I anticipated. That being said, mowing down enemies and then moving to slower activities with a moment's notice actually works out. Nothing's a requirement other than just sort of being there, because it knows that when the going gets tough, the combat and the amount of it is going to be more than enough. Leaving most everybody in the world probably carrying 5 feet of steel-colored PTSD around them works because you seek those moments of tranquility out. Side quests are also noticeably present here, and they're a bit more personal, or if they aren't, there's some moment of humor, some small element of intrigue that shows a deft hand at knowing that not everything has to be life or death. When death does arrive, the skills, the changes to the combat systems, road-weary companions, finding some weapon upgrade, it turns the sedate into pure savagery, and then blood and gore coverage. You go and challenge somebody to a small tavern game because, well, it just feels right. There's something refreshingly direct about it. It's less Game of Thrones power chess and more bloody, single-minded payback. Sometimes that simple motivation hits harder. Your guts are hanging out, you wipe the blood off, and you say, nope, I'm not done yet. And you hit the button to channel your spirit back into your body, and you resurrect right in the middle of a bunch of enemies, and you can sort of hear their absolute terror. I loved that. The skill system is actually brutal this time if you don't search for altars scattered across the world. You could finish the main story with only a few skills unlocked. In Tsushima, it was possible to more or less mainline the game. But in Yotei, that will significantly impact your experience. Next to a lot of skills, you'll also miss out on some melee weapons and tools if you just focus on the main story. You'll only have 3 armor sets. It'll really feel like a completely different game. If you usually do the main story content first and then the side content, rethink that because it's way better to just explore the world and take things as they come. The downside of the weapons basically taking the place of Tsushima's stone, water, wind, and moon stances is that it's hard to stick with your favorite. If you do, it will be less effective than picking the quote-unquote right weapon. Luckily, this is where the Odachi comes in. This enormous sword is great against brutes, but also really powerful against the other enemy types, letting you basically ignore the whole rock-paper-scissors gameplay. The RPG elements could have gone a little bit further, though. A cool new addition are the ranks for the charms, which increase their effectiveness as you complete certain challenges. This really entices you to play in fun, new ways. But that said, the armor sets are once again tied to a single playstyle. Even though Yotei's combat is at its best when you mix things up, sneak around, then pick off enemies, maybe with a ranged weapon, and then finish the rest off in melee combat, but an armor set will only benefit one of these playstyles. It would have been cool if we could grab one perk from one armor set and put it on another armor set to make our own playstyle. Another issue is that we've seen most of these armor perks before in the first game. Yotei would have been much stronger if it introduced more new ways to play instead of repurposing many items and unlocks from Tsushima. Over the course of the game, Atsu is basically catching up to where Jin was at the end of his journey. Many of the main story unlocks or even rewards from the 30-minute-long mythic tales give you things that you've already used countless times before. Sure, give Atsu the ability to listen again, or set her weapon on fire, or tools like a smoke bomb or kunai, but when around 75% of your arsenal is the same as in Tsushima, it does feel like they kind of dropped the ball here. So, it's an additive sequel. Like I said, it's Ghost of Tsushima, but way more packed on top of it. It's an upgrade, but there's some subjectivity to that. You might like the switch to multiple weapons, or you might miss the sole focus on the katana. You might like Atsu, or you might sorely miss Jin Sakai. You might have wanted more Ghost gameplay, or maybe you wanted a bigger step forward, a real evolution and departure, kind of like they did with the main character at least here. Either way, it's going to be down to what you want. What can I say? For me personally, I was a bit skeptical, but I very quickly became heavily addicted to the game, just like I was hooked on Ghost of Tsushima. And that's what I was hoping for. Much like that game, Yotei gets better the more time you put into it. The gameplay gets better and more empowering, and the story gets more dramatic, and there are some incredible performances here. The game once again can pull off effective storytelling, great direction, and moments that make you actually feel something, feel some emotion. Did I love the story as much as the first game? Not quite. It's a matter of taste. It's up to you. But it didn't top it for me personally. But it is still a hell of a lot of fun. Yotei feels different, not worse, not better, improved in some places, possibly lesser than the original in others, but regardless of any issues, it still feels absolutely worth buying and at least equal to the original title. While some games, and more so some sequels, feel like an experiment of new mechanics or ideas, somehow the Ghost series makes those feel like simple experiences, like they were always there. And goddamn if that's not one hell of a skill. Where this ranks among PlayStation Studio sequels really depends on your personal preference. If you love going off the beaten path and immersing yourself in a large open world, this will likely be very high for you. But if you mainly play these games for the story, you might feel that Yotei does not hit the same highs. Also, mainlining this game is not the way to go. Personally, I wish Sucker Punch had added more new unlocks, playstyles, and RPG elements to make this really feel like a next step instead of a redo of Tsushima. But I also realize that's more a personal gripe coming from someone who spent a lot of time with Jin. It doesn't stop the game from being an absolute joy to play. The elements that Sucker Punch set out to improve in Ghost of Yotei, like the open world and its activities, are some of the best we've seen in the genre. Almost every activity or character you come across has a fun twist or side story that is worth exploring. The world itself is much more diverse now, with snowy regions, huge mountains, and a wide range of new enemies to face using the brand new weapon types. I do wish those weapons weren't as heavily tied to the stances from the first game, but they still add a lot of variety, with the Odachi clearly standing out as the best addition to really shake things up. Take your time, enjoy Ghost of Yotei, as we don't get many of these anymore.